So good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my great pleasure to introduce you today to Professor Soumitra Dutta. He is the founding dean of Cornell Business School and currently the dean of said business school in Oxford University. That's a special privilege for me since I'm an undergraduate from Oxford University. In one of your interactions, because I spent the evening with you yesterday digitally, I heard that one of the biggest secrets of success in business is being open to serendipity. And one of the things that's been keeping me up at night for the last many months is AI and its potential. So today, the ability to pick your brain, somebody who has done his PhD in AI 30 years ago and has been following the subject since then, I would say is serendipity. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'm dropping my son to university in a few days' time, and he's going to be studying history for 4 years. And I'm just wondering, when he comes out of university, is he going to have any skills that are relevant?
He will have some skills for sure, but first of all, congratulations on your son joining university. That's always an important step in the life of any young person. But at university, he will learn a lot of knowledge, which some of it will stay for life, some of it will probably change over time. But the most important skill he'll learn is the social side. Networking, making friends, making relationships. In fact, you mentioned that you met your husband at university, so you never know what will happen to your son too.
I hope that he's going to get more than a wife from his university. You have talked about the Moore's law of computer processing power and how computer processing power doubles every 18 months, and that there's a tipping point for technology. You also have a very good visual related to Lake Michigan to explain this. I would very much like you to explain to the audience what that means and where you think we are right now in the world.
Wonderful. So, when I talk to executives in any country, I always show this visual. If you can have the visual, okay, that'll be coming up behind me now so you can look at it. Let me give the context out here. So we all know we are living in exponential times, and often that is substantiated by saying that, well, technology is increasing exponentially, both in terms of computing power and in terms of data and other similar aspects. Now, it's very difficult for us as human beings to understand what exponential really means. So it's a set of numbers, and you can think of it exponentially, but it seems big. But what exactly does it mean in terms of trends over time? So this is a small visual. Hopefully you can look at it clearly. And it shows the filling up of a lake in the US, Lake Michigan, whose volume is roughly the capacity of the human brain in computations per second. And it fills in water at Moore's law frequencies. So you begin with 1 fluid ounce. In 18 months, it doubles. Another 18 months, it doubles, and so on. On the top right, you see a time scale out there. And the time scale goes from 1940 to 2025. And what you will notice is that between 1940 and 2010, you don't see any blue. Okay, so the Moore's law is carrying on, doubling for 70 years, you don't see anything. And then, in 2010, suddenly it explodes. And that's where that exponential curve, the hockey stick part of exponential curve kicks in. Now look at reality, what is happening. Moore's law, modern microprocessors started sometime in the 1960s. So in 2023, we are roughly 63 years into the modern microprocessor age. Compare this to the screen, which means what we have seen in the last 5, 10 years is nothing compared to what we will see in the next 5 to 10 years. It's going to explode. And one reason why we are seeing all these great applications of AI, whether it's ChatGPT or other kinds of applications, happening right now in the last 5 years, all of this is happening in the last 5 years, is because of the additional computational power, additional data that's available right now. So what will happen in the next 5, 10 years, it really remains for us to discover, at the same time be amazed by.
So just taking on from there, Professor has explained very nicely what exponential power means and how it's going to explode. You've also said that humans are more linear. They think linearly. And technology is moving exponentially. So we're on two different curves, right? How do we even compete with technology when it starts moving at this rate?
I don't know whether you can compete with technology per se, but what you can try and do is help to create better lives for people, help to create better organizations, and help to become more competitive in some sense in whatever you're trying to do, achieve in the organization. I think the challenge of any kind of a digital/AI transformation that we all have to face is essentially combining two things. So what I term is, the first part is building forwards. So all of us have a business, all of us have an organization. I'm in education, you are in media, we have probably bankers and other kinds of sectors out here. So you have to apply technology to improve what you're doing things today. That's your building forward, that's what is easier to do, that's what we understand. What is much more harder, at the same time much more exciting, is creating the future. Now what will happen in 5 years' time, 10 years' time? Keep in mind, not in linear world, but exponential world. So things are changing in the next 5 years dramatically. If you look at that and you say, what will happen in 5 years' time? What will happen in 10 years' time? The answer is, we don't know. So don't believe anyone who says they have the answer in 5, 10 years' time. But what you can do is you can do selected experiments to try to experiment with ideas, with concepts, with business models and different kinds of situations, and learn from it and work backwards. So you have to, in fact, do experiments and then try to design your organization so that if it shows signs of success, so that you move towards that in some reasonable path. So this duality, the dual challenge of building forwards and creating backwards, is the essential challenge out here. But the creating backwards is very hard because, A, it sometimes means you have to come up with experiments that are disruptive for your current business, that actually go against your current business model. So people will reject it, people will push back against it, people might actually fail in some of the models because not everything will succeed. How do you deal with the culture of failures? Let's assume you take 2, 3 great people from your organization and say, well, go and test this idea out. I'll give you 2 years, I'll give you X amount of money. And guess what? Maybe they'll fail because a lot of ideas will fail. How do you actually take that failure and learn from it? But more important, how do you make sure that the people who took the risks are welcome back? So the risk management of failure, acceptance of failure becomes a very important part of the creation of future. And that is something we are not very good at, basically.
Right.
That's the challenge.
So, I'm going to boil down this experiment to the question that is on most people's minds. Yeah. If you're running a business, you probably want to know, is it going to save me cost? And if you are part of a business, you want to know, am I going to lose my job? So is AI going to cause job losses?
It'll certainly call and make transitions in jobs more acute, sometimes more frequent. That'll happen for sure. But let's look at, AI is, of course, is a long journey. And today, AI is just the next phase in the digital transformation that we all are going through and different sectors are going through. So what do I think is going to happen? I always say there are 3 axes of impact or change of AI. So one axis is you can actually apply AI in what we're doing today and get all the benefits of cost, quality, time. So take a simple example. In finance or in banking, if you want to get your wealth managed professionally, before you had to have a certain wealth level to be able to afford the time of a professional banker or manager who managed your wealth. Today, all of that is handled by automated algorithms, AI-based systems, and you can do it much more cheaply for people with even a few, much more smaller volumes of wealth. That allows you to do things cheaply, allows you to grow your customer base, so that's all good news. So that's all actually taking things what you're doing today and doing it better, cheaper, faster. That's clearly a very important area. Then there's another very important area which is broadly termed as consumerization. And that really is using technology to make the lives of the consumer, the customer, simpler, easier, hassle-free and friendlier. And the best example of that is how we today interact with Netflix or Amazon or similar systems. We have got used to this ease of use of these systems, and that similar ease of use is something that other sectors are trying to learn, whether it's healthcare, whether it's government services, whether it's banking, and so on. So this consumerization, making life simpler for customers, another very easy, let's say, early win that we can focus on. The much more challenging and the much more harder part is the new business model creation, which is really the creating backwards kind of story. How do you create the new business models? How do you test it out? How do you actually prove it out? I think that's where the interesting challenge is. That's where you need a lot of new skills. That's where you need a lot of new experimentations. And I think combining all these three things is essentially a challenge. So some of it will help make things better for what we have today. But then if you start looking at things in the future, it might require major changes in both your capabilities, your processes, your skills, and a number of other factors.
So that's some of the things that, the big AI companies are saying that, why are you worried about job losses? This is the end of the work week. It's end of monotony,
Yeah.
AI will actually increase productivity, increase GDPs. You will have a universal basic income. You can go to work 2 days a week and be in Bahamas the rest of the time or on a beach. This is utopia.
Okay, so some of it is true and some of it is not. Keep in mind the bigger context of what is happening in the world and tech. Right now, there's a huge backlash against tech. Okay, so that you have to keep in mind in context. There's a huge backlash in many countries, especially the countries that dominate tech to some degree, the US and China. There has been a huge backlash from society, from government, and they're trying to basically control the power, the CEO of these tech companies. So the tech companies are doing all they can to ease the hype, to reduce the stress, to reduce the fear, and basically tell people, don't get alarmed, don't worry, nothing is going to change, or it'll be just making things better and easier for you. And I think that's disingenuous. It's not really correct. I do think that, yes, it'll make things easier, but at the same time, it will, in fact, change things quite dramatically in some sectors. And it is up to us to be able to decide how do you plan for those changes. If you take, for example, sectors like law, a lot of what young lawyers do is basically go through old cases, identify precedents, build some arguments for current cases. That's essentially a lot of what they do. A lot of that today can be done effectively, sometimes even better than humans, by AI-based systems. If you take a little bit more physical domain, let's say truck drivers, it's not yet true in India, but in America, in many of the highway routes, some companies are essentially using automated truck. The driver's still there for safety reasons right now, but it's not longer there in the future. And the driver usually takes over just in the first few miles and the last few miles. The highway driving is basically automated. Now, as the number of truck drivers is reduced, and you see this today already in the Army, Air Force, people don't really have as many fighter pilots. It's all drone-based, people who manipulate drones. What do you do with the 40-year-old truck driver? Can you convert this person and make this person into a data scientist? Possible, but probably going to be difficult. Then you might say that, well, there are plenty of jobs in looking after human beings, child care, elderly care. How easy it is to take a 40-year-old, and let me use a stereotype, a male truck driver, and make this person a child care minder. or an elderly person, in the home carer. These are huge social transition issues. And I don't think we have the answers for that. So I think these are important answers and questions that businesses, private sector has to grapple with. And at the same time, the government has to also step in and provide some support, some regulatory guidance, and in some cases, even direct support for transitioning of skills. I think the skills transition is a major issue ahead of us.
So I want to go back to something you mentioned early on in the answer about this backlash that tech companies are facing, and so they're trying to soften the blow. I mean, we hear very much from the big tech companies, without taking any names, this is a co-pilot, right? But you have talked about the difference between computing and AI. Computing is more co-pilot, it assists you, whereas this new set of generative AI is learning, is using you to learn. And then eventually, if it does that, inherently built into it is that it's going to be better than you.
So it's very important to actually understand where are we with AI skills. So how good is AI today? So if you look at the traditional cognitive tasks, typically tasks linked to recognition of patterns in data, whatever kind of patterns there might be, whether it's medical images, machine data, images of, pictures of anything, any kind of pattern recognition in data, which is a large part of what human beings do. We actually recognize patterns too. Today is done better by machines, AI, that's better. And this you see, for example, in many countries right now, immigration is done on facial recognition. Why? Because the machine can recognize a face better than a human being. That is done better with machines since 2017. Okay, not for a long time, since 2017, better than machines. Cognitive and human sort of reasoning. That's the part where typically human beings did better. Why? Because a lot of common sense knowledge that machines have difficulty in actually understanding. Like, let's say if I give you a sentence like, the old man's glasses were broken, we as human beings automatically interpret the glasses to be reading glasses. It could be drinking glasses, but we have a lot of common sense knowledge, old age, poor eyesight, correction of eyesight, and so on. So we do that kind of interpretation very naturally that machines have a very difficult time without the world knowledge. But that is changing now with ChatGPT, like systems. So that is actually, the gap is becoming smaller and smaller, almost as good. Now, if you look at, for example, creativity, then people say, well, machines are not creative because they use data from existing stuff, but that's not true. Today, increasingly, industrial design, fashion design, musicians, they are using AI-based systems to suggest ideas, to suggest songs, suggest music tones, music patterns. And increasingly, the creativity is now getting automated. Commercially, it's being done so. And then people say, well, maybe in creative side, AI can assist humans. But the empathy side, the relationship side, human beings are the best at it. And machines can never do empathy. Again, that's not true. So I don't know how many of you have watched the movie Her from 2013, in which the man falls in love with the operating system. It's a wonderful movie. In 2014, Microsoft China released a bot called Xiaosei, and then spun it off as a separate company. And today, Xiaosei is the girlfriend of 600 million Chinese males. Okay? So it is actually able, technology, just as many tech companies figured out how to create addictive behaviors. So today we are very good at getting addicted to technology. Tech companies have figured out how to manipulate the emotions of people to make it sort of really bond emotionally. The only reason they haven't rolled it out in all our traditional digital assistants is because of the backlash. They're worried about the backlash. That's the only reason they're not rolled out. Technically, you have systems that are actually being used in specialized cases. So they are, for example, chatbots that are used for counseling teenagers. A lot of teenagers have troubles, emotional troubles and so on, especially women or girls. and they don't feel comfortable discussing them with their parents or the teachers because they feel judged. So they actually feel more comfortable discussing with chatbots. So that kind of emotional bonds is also sort of there. Maybe not rolled out as much, but is there. So you combine the three things: cognitive, creative, and emotional. You combine them together, what kind of capabilities are looking in the future? You're looking at very powerful capabilities. If I take for example, my business education, I'm actually thinking seriously that when I hire a professor that costs X $100,000 in salary per year, and I give a contract for 30 years, is that a wise decision as compared to investing the same money in R&D in helping create an intelligent, empathy-based tutor that can actually advise students? Many of the faculty advisors students, some of them are very good, some of them are not very good. That's the reality. And suppose I can actually have high quality, empathy-oriented, student advising, that'll be good for education. Yeah. So we don't know where these frontiers will go, and all I go back to that vertical curve, the Lake Michigan's thing. So when people say, well, ChatGPT did not do this, ChatGPT failed that. Yeah, it's a technology is only 3-4 years old. What will happen in 5 years' time? Given that kind of vertical rise, we don't know. So it's very too early to actually rule out and say, well, technology will do this, and for the rest we are fine, because the human beings will do that. So I think the issues are quite complicated, and you need governments to actually come in and look at these things very seriously. At the same time, having said this, there are lots of early gains in the process to be made.
So like you just said, that one of the things that China has done is created this one girlfriend for 600 million men in China. And the only reason why other companies are not doing it because they're worried about the backlash.
That's my view.
Yeah. Well, they haven't done it, so we'll go with that. So how do we define this? Because there's a lot of talk by AI and big tech companies about responsible AI. But the way I look at it, it depends on which perspective or which side you're looking at it from, right? One company's responsible AI is another's worst nightmare. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, so I think this, it's not just responsible AI, it's responsible use of technology. And that is very important. I think that's where that's where the regulation part comes in. The regulation part is very important because we have to somehow help society use technology in a responsible manner. It's the same reason why, for example, any technology can have positive things and negative things. And we have to, society, be more oriented towards a positive side and be more careful in preventing the negative side. It's the same reason why in the biological gene sequencing technology, which also progressed dramatically, there are some ethical, legal sort of constraints put in terms of don't try to sequence human babies and change CRISPR technology to change the gene sequences of embryos and so on, while that is same technology is being used for farms, for farm animals and farm plants quite widely already. So what I'm saying is that that's an area which is evolving. I think regulations and societal norms are very important. Now, my biggest concern is that in the world of AI, to talk about AI and digital technologies, the world is getting split in two halves, basically, which is the American half and the Chinese half. And the two halves don't really talk. And their ability to talk is decreasing year by year. And so do we have any hope for a global system? The chances of that is decreasing. I don't want to appear pessimistic, but there is a real concern out here is that the two major powerhouses in the world of technology don't want to talk to each other, don't want to agree to common norms and principles and other kinds of guiding sort of regulations. It's a cause of concern.
And they could have very different views on personal IP, a personal copyright, because China's view on what is private and what is not, and versus US is quite different, at least what they declare, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm concerned, how do we protect ourselves? Because anyone could very easily make an AI avatar of you and say whatever it wanted to. And if you complain, they say, oh, well, he has blue eyes, you don't. So, where do you start drawing the line? Like, this is me, my face, my thoughts, my individuality, and you can't use it to make an AI avatar of it. And it becomes particularly important for people who are famous and who've built an IP for themselves.
Very important question, a hard question, no easy answers. And today already you're seeing challenges in the case where you can use generative AI to, learn from artist style of paintings and create a similar style painting, okay? And the question really is that fair use of IP? Today the challenge is that, again, we don't have rules and regulations really to govern this very well. It's all very fluid and very different across geographies. And also what we have is that, in some sense, the technology will evolve to a point at which it'll, on one hand, make it very easy to manipulate these things. On the other hand, hopefully, it'll give us tools to control it also better from our individual point of view, by which I mean, today, largely, we are in a Web 2.0 world. And the Web 3.0 world, which is being built right now, is being created, the technology stack for the Web 3.0 world is not yet done completely, it's not yet rolled out. And the hope is that when the technology stack for the Web 3.0 is done and rolled out and more widely available, individual citizens like you and I, we'll have more control over our own data, we'll have control over who actually accesses it and what permissions we give to it, and if there's any financial transactions, what are the elements of the transaction. So till we don't have that Web 3.0 commercially widely available, and could be 5, 10 years from now, in the meantime, we are really at the mercy of the tech companies and to some degree government regulations around it. And that's one reason why you're finding the tech companies collecting as much data as possible. They're not really, often the data being collected is not directly being used right now. But they're collecting it in the hope that maybe sometime in the future they'll find ways to use it. Okay, so right now there's a land grab happening in the domain of citizen behavior, citizen users, whatever is being created. Now, what is very important out here is that at the same time, the tech companies who are the leaders in the space also have to adopt their own internal, let's say, standards, internal ethics in guiding some of their own actions out here. Some of it is happening, and I hope it becomes stronger, but there's a lot more to be done in this area.
So I only have a few minutes left, and though this is a business conference, I'm going to take the discussion a little bit philosophical, and I want to ask you 2 questions, so you're going to have to be a little short because we only have about 2 minutes. One, does this technology allow people to live forever? No one needs to die because you just upload their thoughts, their avatar, onto computers, and you can say, okay, depending on the decisions that they took for their lifetime, what would they decide about this? Warren Buffett, or after he passes away, his decisions could be done to use in investment long after. And do people then need to put in their will, I want to die, do not resurrect me digitally?
Fascinating question. Your answer is as good as mine. Of course, being alive has multiple components. It's not just only the way you think or the way you decide. There's a number of elements of that. Some of those elements can potentially live forever. It's true. You have the websites of people and accounts of people who pass away, unfortunately. And there's an interesting question of how much of their life is represented out there, and that will become more and more a question going forward. So another one of the fascinating issues that we have to grapple with. Okay.
Another side of life that affects all of us is love, right? Do you think with the amount of data we have, will we algorithmically be able to find our soulmate? And does this actually, AI, give love another chance?
You're asking me all the tough questions there at the end. I hope it'll allow us to find love, not just in terms of the person we choose to love, but also in the terms of things we love to do. Because I really think that AI will allow us more possibilities, will give us more skills, will give us, I might be a terrible musician, but with some AI, maybe I can create, compose better music. So what I'm saying is that it'll help us to do more of the kind of activities we love and maybe love and find the right people also. But hopefully that is a positive note to end on. It'll help us to become more loving and more loved and hopefully become better individuals and better human beings.
So I think one of the things about AI which I'm grappling with is that once you start matching patterns and connecting dots at that quantum level, actually it makes everything very predictable, at least for a while. And then where's the magic? I mean, love, death, these are all unpredictable things, and that's what gives it the hold that they have on us, and even serendipity, where we began from, right? That's not predictable. So is the best way to beat AI being unpredictable?
What I would say is that embrace technology and embrace it in your own way. So all of us are different individuals, and that's the way God made us. And we all love to do different things and love to explore different topic areas, and let's actually embrace AI to make ourselves more special and more individualized and not become more generic copies of each other. And that, I think, is something that I hope will help us in the long run.
Thank you so much. This has been
a
fantastic session. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Look, you guys may or may not have a job, but you may find your soulmate, so there's a toss-up there. Thank you.
Thank you very much.